Well, hey everybody, it's Mike from Profiling Evil. Um, I'm doing something I haven't done in more than a year. I'm going live, and I thought I'd do this just to have a little fun with everybody. So I hope you'll put your comments in the little comment area. I'm trying to remember if I know how to run StreamYard, so I'm going to be trying to follow these comments and making sure that I'm staying up with them as they come in. And I want to thank any of you who decided to jump in and see what the heck I'm up to. I have been so disturbed by the Paul Caneiro murder trial that I thought I'd jump on and see how you're feeling about it too. So, Janai B, hey, it's nice to see you. Thanks for weighing in. I hope everybody will say hi and we'll figure out how to get through this. I don't know how long we'll spend on here tonight. A couple things I don't know because it's been so long since I've gone live is how well you're hearing me, and if the audio is too loud, if it's too low. Nate, thanks. Good evening to you as well. Paula, hello to you. Jason, how you doing? Mandy, calling in from the UK. Great to hear from you. Levon, oh, it's just so neat to see so many people starting to pop in. Again, it has been more than a year since I have gone live, and I've been pretty troubled by the Paul Caneiro case, and I'd like to see if some of you would weigh in on if you've been watching that thing at all. I'd like to know how much you know about him. Stacy, thanks for letting me know on the audio. Real happy. Thank you. Now, listen, we're going to do something entirely off the books tonight. So first and foremost, I want you to know that if you want to call in and jump on with me and chat for a minute, we're even going to do that. And I think I remember how to get a little ticker tape to run with the link of where we're going to be talking. So there you go. If you want, call in. I'll bring you in. We'll chat for a minute. Don't go on too long. But let's see. Mandy says she can't see my eyes. I don't know what to say about that, Mandy. It says there are 2 lives on our notifications from Penkey. I only see lower 2/3. I don't know what that means. Am I wearing lipstick? No. let me see if I can fix my camera a little bit here and clean that up. Let's see if does that help? That's pretty bright. That looks more like an old time image. We'll try that one. And no, I'm not wearing lipstick, but thanks for asking, Teresa. Hey, from San Antonio. What a great town you live in there. So first off, let me know how many of you have been paying attention to the Canary case, what your thoughts have been thus far, what's frustrated you. And let me just give kind of a quick overview of the case. It's in the middle of trial right now. This thing is going to go on, I think, for a really long time. But the case boils down to back in 2018, Paul Caneiro is charged with murdering his brother, his brother's wife, and their 2 children. And the story that is being presented by the prosecution and that the witnesses are testifying to at this point is that Paul Caneiro was living in a pretty extravagant lifestyle. He was filtering money off of the company and keeping that money for personal uses. And with that money, he was going on trips. Now, they're not allowing this into trial, but apparently he had a relationship that was off the books. Now, the extent of that relationship, we don't know, other than he was traveling with this woman and taking her to fancy places, taking her back to her home country. But he was taking money from the company and using that to run a pretty extravagant lifestyle. Now, on the evening of let's see, I've got the date here. Anyway, on the evening of the murders, the state is alleging that Paul Caneiro showed up at his brother's house at 3 o'clock in the morning, and his intent was to go in and kill his brother, who had discovered that he was stealing money from the company. And because of that, he decided that, according to the state, that he was going to kill his brother. Now, I thought it might be helpful to kind of show you on a map where we're talking about. This is in New Jersey. So the United States, over here on the far right of the United States, is New Jersey. We're going to kind of zoom into the area where they were living. Right here is the home where Paul lived in New Jersey. This address is publicly out and available for anyone. But let me just kind of zoom into the neighborhood to show you the kind of neighborhood that he was living in, and seemed to be doing okay, a pool in the backyard, but not as well as it appears his brother was doing, who may have been managing money a little bit better. His brother lived in a very beautiful home. And look at the acreage around there, which is kind of interesting because this presents a real logistics problem for Paul, if in fact he's responsible for this murder, to approach the residence undetected, because there's not a back street to park on and walk in. And as you can see here, there's a rather long driveway up into the house. They too appear to be living pretty well. At about 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the morning, he reportedly showed up at the house and turned off the power to the house, cut the power. So probably went out to the main power box or something and shut the power down. Once he did that, that caused Keith, his brother, to get up out of bed. Again, think about this. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. So they would have been sound asleep. His brother came downstairs and out the back of the house, where they had a generator in the back area of the house. And he went out there to kick on the generator so they had electricity. At that point, he was confronted and shot. And all indications are that he was shot 4 times, multiple times in the head and once in the back. So it's unknown when that shot to the back happened. If it happened when Keith turned to try to run back in the house once he realized he was in danger, and he was shot in the back then, and then finished off later, we just don't know. But once Keith had been eliminated, then the state alleges that Paul walked into the house, where he confronted Keith's wife, Jennifer, at the base of the stairs inside the home. And there he stabbed her multiple times, and then shot her in the head, executing her. So again, we don't know exactly when things happened, and it may have unfolded very quickly. So we don't know if she was shot first and then stabbed later as a retaliatory or anger kind of a thing. But again, stabbing is just an incredibly intimate thing. From there, he went in and killed their 11-year-old son by stabbing. This little boy's name is Jesse. And after stabbing Jesse, he went down and killed the 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. And what we saw is kind of some escalation in the homicides, because with the 11-year-old boy, he stabbed him multiple times and didn't shoot him. And then on Sophie, he stabbed her at least 17 times. And then here is the real tragedy that I'm going to speak about on a video that I'm going to put out on Saturday morning, I think. And that is that both Jesse and Sophie, when the medical examiner performed the autopsy on their bodies, they discovered that those 2 children were still alive when allegedly Paul set the home on fire, because their lungs were filled with smoke as well. And of course, that wouldn't happen if they were deceased. At that point, and I've kind of let the cat out of the bag. I'm going to remove this. Paul allegedly then set their home on fire, and set it on fire with kind of a low burn. And I don't know if we're going to get more testimony about what that low burn means, but then he drove back to his home. Now, I do want to point out one thing on the map, because I thought it was interesting. Again, at 2:00 in the morning, in looking at the route that he most likely would have taken, it is only about a 16-minute drive to go the 13 miles between both residents. And again, this is at 2:00 in the morning, looking at normal traffic flows. So in that 13 minutes of time, he left their home, reportedly went to his home, and then lit his home on fire to make it appear that he wasn't a suspect, but that he was a victim like his brother. Now, I'm going to pause there for a minute and let's just look at some of the questions that might be coming in, or comments. And there's some really nice comments about people. Thank you for saying nice things. And I just got to show this. I'm not wearing lipstick. I have been known to wear lip balm, and I keep it very close by my beeswax, but no lipstick. So thank you so much. Let's go through and see if there are any questions. It says, lean forward. The screen is cutting off the top of your head. Is that true for everyone? Please kind of weigh in on that. And what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to just move the screen down a little bit, because I don't want the top of my head cut off. So let's see. Let's see. And thanks again, everybody, for jumping on. Gosh, it's been so long. I don't know that I ever planned on doing many lives again, but my wife is away tonight, and heck, I didn't know what to do with myself. We had a 5.7 earthquake here in northern Utah early this morning, 8:00 this morning. So I went up to my cabin to check not only the snow levels, but to see if there was any damage to the cabin. We actually had some cracks in the wall. We were very close to the epicenter, but everything seems to be holding together. So Spark Calico says, horrible person to do this to children. Yeah, or even to adults. It says there's another live that's not vertical. I don't know if you're looking at this on a portrait device rather than a landscape, it might be hard. Hi, Dawn Marie. Good to see you. And let me just kind of get through these. Let's see. And yeah, this is how I feel about it too. Alive. Holy cow. I haven't done anything in a long time. And thank you so much, Sparky Calico, for this. I appreciate the fact that you appreciate what I have to say, because tonight I appeared on Court TV for a few moments to talk about the case with Vinnie Politan. And one of the questions that he asked me was if I think that if in fact Paul Caneiro is responsible for these murders, that he would have gone there with the intent to murder the entire family. And I'd like to know your thoughts on that. So please take a moment and weigh in on whether you think he would have done this with the idea that he was going to go into that household and murder the entire family. I'm actually going to explore that a little because I tried to do a little bit of behavioral analysis in preparation for Court TV today to talk a little bit about this and to try to understand from a behavioral perspective what he may or may not have been thinking. So please, if you have a thought on that, put it in the chat area. And right there at the bottom, if you want to join the chat and say hello and ask a question live, please do it. We'll bring you in and we'll chat for a minute. So let's see, I clicked on the wrong one there, but She Jukester says, I think he did intend to kill them all to be the inherited one for all the money. Now, that's an interesting concept, and it certainly has to be considered that if, in fact, the entire family was killed, part of the money that he was skimming off reportedly was money for trusts for the children, both Keith's children, who are now deceased, and Paul's children, 2 children as well. And so that would have certainly pushed that money likely over to his family and to his children. And if he, in essence, was stripping the company of money, he may have been stripping those trust accounts, because there is some indication that he was also hitting the trust accounts, which he had access to, and stealing money off of that. And the whole house of cards was collapsing around him. I have to agree with Stacy. He does sound like a complete lunatic. But nonetheless, that is really an option that he may have done it. Who knows? Now, let's see. Positive Vibe says, I believe he got started with his brother and the hate just took over. And you know, I'm going to talk a little bit about that and that evolution that sometimes occurs in these kind of crime scenes for a few moments. And we'll see. Said the estate had beneficiaries and kids first. So yeah, I mean, that would have eliminated, I would think, money going in one direction and not to another. But we'll wait and see. So, and there's a comment here. I didn't know this. Mama Slew says he was getting sued big time. That may very well be the case, and you probably have something to back that up. Might be cool to see it. But what we do know is that the house of cards was falling. His brother had figured out that he was rifling money from the business. Likely his brother's wife, because husbands and wives talk, would have been aware of that. And that may lend somewhat to this. But here's the first point that I want to bring out that I think is incredibly significant when we think about whether he went there purposely to murder the entire family. And that is the most important thing that I continue to consider in this thing is the fact that he went there at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. He arrived at the home somewhere in that time frame, a time when virtually everybody is going to be in the home. Not only the adults and not only the children, but the adults as well. And this could have happened as a business hour confrontation, but it's clear that it wasn't a spontaneous argument, although there is some discussion that 2 hours earlier, it kind of came to a head with Keith demanding to have passwords and other information, and that he was going to be cutting Paul out of the business and out of the decision-making. From a behavioral standpoint, and I really want your comments on this, folks, so please be weighing in, because if you're not participating, then I'm going to just assume that it's really not that interesting. So, but from a behavioral standpoint, I think it's really important to also consider that the hour kind of signals an acceptance that there's going to be other people in the home. And when you know there's going to be other people in the home, you know there's a possibility of having conflict and interaction with those people. And this indifference of whoever was going to be there kind of makes me think that there was some intent to not only confront and kill Keith, because again, he could have done that in the daytime. He could have done it during business hours. He could have done it when the kids were at school. But 3 o'clock is an hour of darkness and quiet and silence. I don't know how many of you are awake at 3 a.m., but it's a point where he could really gain control over his brother quickly, probably over the whole family, or at least have some possibility that he might be able to get away with this. So I'm going to pause there for a second and just look at what some of your comments are. Let's see here. She Jukester says, seems to me that he had to kill them all to get the money to run off with his mistress that he was paying for. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. But again, why would he have to kill them all other than the estate money or life insurance money if he was third in line on life insurance or things like that? And that's going to be interesting to see if life insurance comes out. Maybe someone can put a comment in there if they've heard that life insurance has come out. Now, Janai B says he wanted to confront the family. So I guess I'd ask, why would he want to confront the family? Although I have wondered from a behavioral standpoint if it's as much about continuing to punish his brother, even though his brother's dead, by killing others in the family. I don't know. That's an interesting one. It says, let's see. Do you think he knew his brother was going to go outside or was that a surprise? So the theory that seems to be making pretty good sense is that the brother would have probably come outside because the generator didn't automatically kick on when the power was cut to the house. So he would have gone out to investigate. So basically, by cutting the power, he would be luring his brother out into the yard. But whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. And again, I'll look for your comments here. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and this is kind of the thing that I was talking about in my first assessment of the 3 o'clock hour, is that the expectation is people are going to be home. And that means there's an expectation you might have confrontation, or you may be going there specifically for that purpose, to kill the entire family. So we don't know if he was in line for the money after the kids and the estate. I would suspect that there was a financial win by doing this, if in fact that is the motivation. So here's somebody, let's see, Be a Better Person Today. Holy cow, what a great name. Originally from New Jersey. So somehow this case is hitting harder. It's horrific. Yeah, I mean, this is a terrible case. And again, folks, if any of you got the nerve to jump on with me live, I'm giving you kind of a once in a very slim pickings opportunity to jump on live and chat for a minute down below. So just call in. You'll need a camera and a microphone to be able to do it. Your phone will work. So anyway, Kristen Perry, hey, thanks. Stoked about your coverage of this. I'm not used to coming on, and it's a lot of fun. It's just I'm still working a lot of different little gigs here and there. And by the way, I hope you all are planning on, I'm going to pull this up. In fact, maybe what I'll do is even play a link of this, but I hope you're all going to subscribe to my new podcast that's launching on February 3rd. It's called Gardens of Evil. And it is about the book that many of you have already purchased called The Zion Society. But it is Gardens of Evil inside the Zion Society cult. And it is season 5 of the American Nightmares podcast. Many of you probably already are subscribed to that. But it is a 7-part series, and it is really nice quality. And if I see some comments saying you'd like to hear, there's a little trailer in here you can listen to offline, or if you'd like, and if there's enough interest, we can listen to it as part of the podcast tonight as we sit and chat. But it's fun to be on with you. So yes, She Jukester, the power was cut, and that was what lured him outside. And it all starts to kind of make sense, doesn't it? That once he was out, they then had access to him. So let's see what else we've got here. I think this is a great comment. He could have shot his brother and left, but he didn't. And it makes you wonder why. And it makes sense that he had plans for the whole family. And again, that's kind of the working theory. So let's go cover something else, because I think this is a good segue to talk about the fact that Keith was clearly the primary target, but he wasn't the only risk. And we start to see that risk unfolding, because under any scenario, if in fact he goes into the house and he meets Jennifer, Keith's wife, at the bottom of the stairs, likely coming down to investigate, or she very much could have heard the gunshots, because if you are watching the trial, there was a neighbor who heard those same gunshots. And you can see, based on how far his home is from the neighbor, that gunshot was clearly loud enough that the neighbor could hear it and come over and report it. So here we see the home. I'm going to take that route back off. But I mean, look how far it is to his neighbors. If we were to just measure that in feet, I mean, he's 2 football fields from that neighbor, 660 feet from that neighbor, 500 feet from that neighbor, 530 feet from this neighbor. So and I guess what I'm belaboring here is that if the neighbor could hear the gunshots, then it would make perfect sense that the wife upstairs would hear the gunshots. And that would have brought her downstairs wondering what on earth has gone on. Now, if she walked outside, she may have witnessed the execution of her husband. And then that would have increased Paul's risk, if in fact he's the killer, and would have made it a little easier to understand why he may have pursued her back into the house and then took her life. There also is some interesting concerns and questions surrounding the fact that she was shot once, but then stabbed multiple times. Now, keep in mind, if he was shot 5 times, she represents the 6th round. We don't know how many rounds were in that weapon. We don't know if he planned on shooting everyone with the weapon and the gun jammed, or he had some kind of malfunction and then he had to resort to the knife, because from with Jennifer, she stabbed multiple times in the torso and then she shot in the head. So again, was she shot first and stabbed after, or was she stabbed and then shot? But the children weren't shot. They were only stabbed. And only is kind of a raunchy word, so please forgive me on that. But it's interesting to see this progression or change, but there oftentimes are reasons why. And it may be that he had a malfunction, or that he had a jam that he couldn't work past, and he had to switch to that. So who knows? Let's see. Oh, the other thing about Jennifer's movement is it may have been too, that if she came out and discovered her husband being murdered and ran back into the house, there's an indication that she was near the entry that goes to the basement. So it's possible, because weapons were stored in the basement. There was one weapon hidden under the bed of in the bedroom. But oh no, that was on Paul's house. I'm sorry. So I don't know if there were weapons in the basement, but Jennifer was near that door that went into the basement. I suspect if she's screaming and being murdered and a gunshot is going off in the house, that would have awakened the children, who could have then walked into this crime scene. And because they walked into the crime scene, then it became necessary to remove them as possible witnesses, because they certainly would have known, especially if it's Paul Caneiro who's responsible for this, that it was their Uncle Paul that was standing at the bottom of the stairs. So let's look at a few more comments here. Let's see. Hope you're enjoying this live. I appreciate you jumping on. Gosh, it's nice that you would. Thanks. I thank you for buying Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. And folks, that's a book of mine. If you haven't read it, you can get it at profilingevil.com, or you can get it through Ingram Spark or Amazon. I saw it in Barnes and Noble the other day. And it's a book that I wrote specifically for the true crime enthusiast. And you might find it enjoyable. I don't know. Maybe I've got some artwork for it. Anyway, you can find it at profilingevil.com. And thanks again for purchasing that. Let's see. Now, I'm assuming, yes, let's hear it means the Gardens of Evil trailer. So we'll play that in a minute. Thank you. Let's see. And thanks, Don Marie, for popping this up, folks. Love having you join channel memberships because we get a little money from you, and that really helps. And one of the things I noticed is when I quit doing lives, we quit getting revenue. But thankfully, we've gotten revenue in a number of other ways, and we've been able to use that for some really cool things. In fact, for those of you who don't know what I do with the money that I earn here at Profiling Evil, I pay the bills, I pay for internet and a few things like that. But the majority of the money from my book, Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult, which is the book that the Gardens of Evil podcast was written about. The proceeds from that book have been going toward a children's advocacy center that actually opened in May of this year. We had survivors from this cult who spoke at the ribbon cutting. It's a beautiful center. And then just a few months ago, we were so thrilled to announce a scholarship at Weber State University, the King Family Endowment, that we're using money from these efforts and from the books that I sell to provide scholarships for law enforcement for child investigations. So it's been really fun to be able to push the money that way. Kristen Perry, new member, thank you so much. That's awesome. Let's see. Got Samantha jumping in from Oregon. Not sure what this means. Didn't realize he had membership. I might have missed an earlier comment. Let's see. Yeah. Holy cow. I haven't gone live again, probably in more than a year. So it is kind of fun to do it. Mama Sleuth, that's a very kind comment. Says your voice is soothing. It's interesting. My wife says it probably just puts you right stone to sleep when I start yammering. So thanks for watching me on Crime Talk with Scott Reich. Scott is such a good friend, and we have a lot of fun together, and we promise each other every time we do it that we're going to do a lot more events together to take advantage of each other's expertise. He's been a longtime friend, and I really appreciate him. But now we've talked about Keith, we've talked about Jennifer. I want to talk a little bit about the children, because they went from just being there to being witnesses to becoming deceased victims. So the children's role, I think, in the sequence is kind of critical, because again, was it by design from the very beginning that he was going to kill all of the family? Or when they heard their mother perhaps screaming or being murdered, did they come downstairs? And then once they saw allegedly Uncle Paul, did they then become the next target? And the prosecutors are going to continue to argue that the children weren't collateral, that they, and we know that they didn't die by the fire. We know that they were murdered and they were stabbed. In fact, little Sophie, again, why it was so necessary to stab her 17 times in the torso and face and neck and head is really beyond me. But again, it may be the disorganization that starts to kick in, because sometimes predators, especially inexperienced predators, go into these crime scenes. They're very organized at first, but once the realities of what's going on, once the adrenaline starts flowing and the emotion, almost the pursuit like a dog chasing something, once that starts happening, then we start seeing some pretty interesting behaviors. So again, were they already awake? Doubt it at 2 a.m., but they were likely awakened by the noise, either the gunshots or the power going out or their mother's screams or something like that. But one thing we can pretty comfortably say is that at this point, the offender is inside of the home. He's killed both the parents at this point, and it appears that he would have been known to the children, which means that they are absolute witnesses, and his risk is going through the ceiling. So the identity exposure brings an incredible amount of risk. And from a really cold behavioral lens, leaving the children alive would have guaranteed that he would have been discovered and the finger would have been pointed at him. It would have guaranteed that they would have said, Uncle Paul did this. And it would have guaranteed that the motive was exposed. So prosecutors might argue this as the moment where the finality of the whole thing took place. And this shifted entirely to an eliminate the problem, which equals eliminate the witnesses. Which kind of leaves me wondering this question of whether all of this was about punishment or whether it then became about control, because the darker behavioral question in these things always becomes why the entire family, and was it a way to continue to punish Keith for now exposing Paul? And these are possibilities that the prosecutor might be able to get in. But one thing is clear, by annihilating Keith's children, they can annihilate Keith. And I often think back to when I was working with Greg Cooper on the murder of Tutankhamun. Again, the pharaoh. And if you saw our Discovery special, Who Killed King Tut, one of the things we talked about is how in ancient Egypt, the pharaohs who replaced the outgoing pharaoh by death would generally come in and deface anything that had to do with that pharaoh. Basically, they would do everything they could to wipe them from existence so that they would be remembered as the most powerful. Well, in kind of a goofy twist, by eliminating especially Jesse, the family name stops. By eliminating the children, the money train may continue toward Paul and his children. And we've talked a little bit about that. So I'm going to stop for a moment and read some of your comments and throw up the red flag if this is getting just too long-winded and boring, and we'll call it a night. Otherwise, I got a few more things to chat about. She Jukester, thanks. I love going on court TV. I've been doing it for about 7 years. CrimeCon, I always do the live shows, and the people there just really treat me well. Thanks for this. The poor children. Yeah. Holy cow. Here, Scott Reich is another man with a respected podcast. He has a sixth sense of humor. I'll leave that with you there. Let's see. A lot of parallels to the Murdaugh case. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Let's see. Oh, how much are your subscriptions? Okay, it's a moment to sell for a moment. I've only got two. I've got $1.99 a month, which is the supporter area, and then the academy level is $4.99 a month. I try to push videos out so that you get them sometimes ahead of anyone else, but mostly it's just a way for you to say thanks and help us out a little bit, and we really do appreciate it. So thanks for asking that question. So let's get back into this, and we'll get you all off for the night doing something funner. So the question becomes, did this thing just unfold as the emotion was going, or was it all planned again? And I think this is where the prosecution, because they've come in and said this was planned, that the murder was planned, and they haven't said that Keith's murder was planned. They've kind of left it as the entire thing. I think the 3 a.m. timing really shows what they planned on, what he planned on doing. And I think there was, again, there couldn't have been an expectation that Keith would have been home alone. The power disruption shows the planning and preparation and the attempt to lure Keith out of the home where he would be able to then confront him. The weapon choice, I think, is pretty interesting because, again, with Keith, he was shot. There was no knife wounds. He was just flat out shot 5 times. He represented more anger, represented more threat, and that may explain that. Then Jennifer, 1 shot and multiple stab wounds. Again, was that by design? I don't know. Or was it that his weapon jammed, or that he then experimented after shooting by stabbing, and that was really fulfilling, which led to the stabbing of the children? I don't know. The post-fire shows the awareness of what evidence might be left behind and the need to clean up. And that same kind of cleanup was found at Paul's home when he set his fires around the home, in the window well, on the car, and a few other places. I think one other place. But the thing that was interesting there is that he attempted to burn the clothing up, but they were able to recover Paul's jeans with human blood on them. They also found an unspent bullet laying on the ground. It'll be interesting to see when they put the ballistics together to show that that bullet was fired from the same weapon, or that bullet had been cycled through the same weapon, or it was the same caliber as the bullet that was fired to kill Keith and Jennifer. The defense, all they can do is say Keith was the target, that Paul also had his home hit, that things escalated unpredictably, that in the course of Keith being killed by whoever did it, not Paul, in their opinion, that Jennifer intervened and the children became tragic victims. I don't know. But I guess the thing is about why this would matter to jurors is, I guess the thing that I want to point out is jurors don't have to decide why Paul might have done this emotionally. It helps to be able to theorize and put something behind that. But what the prosecution needs to get across for the jury is that there was pre-planning, there was premeditation, there were things that happened before arrival, there were things to draw Paul out of to draw Keith out of the house. There were confrontations that are clear, either outside or at least at the very minimum at the bottom of the stairs with Jennifer, and then of course that the children were killed. And I think the jury has to be reminded that those kids had smoke inhalation, which means they suffered. They suffered long enough for that house to fill with smoke and then their lungs to fill with smoke before they eventually died. So it kind of destroys the entire idea that it was someone targeting the family, two brothers, and that it was more intimate than that. So I guess for the state, bottom line is that Paul went to the house at 3 a.m. That's not accidental. Paul lured Keith out of the house and then shot him, if they are correct. That's not accidental. That's not something that unfolded in a defensive way. That the killing wasn't something that happened in panic. It was something that happened through preparation, and that the fire was strictly there to destroy evidence. That's my opinion on this. So let's see what you have to say, and then if not, we're going to play something from Gardens of Evil, because it doesn't look like there are any questions. So let me, Gardens of Evil. By the way, all you got to do is look up Gardens of Evil on your favorite podcast platform, and you can subscribe to this. And I think what I'll do is minimize me and bring that in full screen. Okay, it sounds like you couldn't hear it, so I'm gonna check something real quick and see if I can solve that problem. So thanks for telling me that, and I'm gonna try bringing it in and fixing what the problem was. It says share the audio. Huh. Okay, I'm going to try this one more time. Please let me know if you can hear this.
Gardens of Evil, Inside the Zion Society Cult, is a 7-episode audio documentary that tells the unbelievable true story of a cult that operated in plain sight in an otherwise ordinary American suburb.
It wasn't a cult up in the mountains with 500 acres of land around them. These were people living in a developed area, and they were getting away with it for more than 10 years before it finally was able to come to light.
You'll be introduced to the Zion Society in its early days through the eyes of a young couple who moved into the new neighborhood subdevelopment of Northwood.
And I remember coming home from work one day and bushes were planted and half my lawn was already in. And I'm like, what in the heck is going on? We had a little alarms going off, but not a lot. And we didn't communicate. And that's how that all started.
Until a decade later, when a former member of the group came forward and confessed to law enforcement the horrors happening behind closed doors, leading to the dismantling of the Zion Society and the freeing of dozens of children from a life of relentless abuse.
Every day, it was every hour, it was our whole life. Some form of abuse, emotional, physical, or sexual. Like, I can't think of any time that was just joy.
Most importantly, we'll hear from the survivors, many of whom have broken their silence for the first time to tell me their stories of living inside the secretive sect and the years after as they've struggled and fought for healing.
I have to remind myself every day that I need to forgive for me, not for them, so that I don't destroy my body in hate, I have to let go.
My name is Aaron Mason, and before the series begins on February 3rd, I wanted to set the scene for this podcast and explain why I believe it's a story that needs to be told.
In Gardens of Evil, we're going to be able to hear from victims who went through thousands of sexual assaults and physical assaults.
That's former detective Mike King, who led the Zion Society investigation.
We're not going to talk about those events one by one. It's just too ugly, and it really doesn't serve a purpose.
My priority on this podcast is to do right by the people whose story it is. They lived it, I didn't. But some of the details are pretty salacious, so I've done my best not to be lurid for lurid's sake, I want to communicate the facts of the situation without it feeling gross or exploitative. But that's only part of the story. Gardens of Evil is about much more.
It's about this process of coercive mind control, this ideology that takes people and gets them into positions where they will be victimized, and how they can somehow take seemingly normal people and convince them to commit crime.
Can the line between victim and victimizer become blurred if an abuser is themselves abused?
Whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, we'll go through what it does to them over the course of a lifetime, because we now have the lens 30 years later of looking back on this case.
Mike is retired now after spending 45 years in and around law enforcement. And in that time, he's become an expert on cults and cult behaviors. Throughout the podcast, we expose the methods used by cult leaders and anyone, frankly, who manipulates people for their own selfish gain. An abusive partner, a bad boss. The playbook is all the same, and we'll highlight the most common red flags. Have you heard the expression, what you see isn't always what you get? Well, one of the central figures in this story is the personification of that sentiment, the leader of the Zion Society, a man named Arvin Shreve.
Arvin Shreve was an unassuming landscaper that everybody seemed to like. He was just kind of a normal looking 61-year-old grandpa kind of guy. And yet underneath the facade that he had created was a very evil individual who was conniving, who took the opportunity to twist people's belief systems and actually capitalized on their belief systems, but twisted it just enough to fit his own perverted needs.
The Zion Society owned several houses on more or less a big cul-de-sac, and you could always tell which ones were theirs because they had the most beautiful gardens, perfectly manicured lawns, trees and shrubs, rock fountains, you name it. People would even drive through to look at them, having no idea the nightmares occurring inside. This, of course, mirrored Arvin, who himself had an outward demeanor that people loved, but secretly perpetrated abuse at a rate that was nearly unfathomable. The full story of the Zion Society hasn't really been told until now, but it's one you won't forget. Even Mike King, in all his experience, says this one is different.
You know, I've seen cases where there's more horrific things that happen with people who have been murdered or badly mutilated, but nothing has impacted me like this has.
Gardens of Evil, Inside the Zion Society Cult, is a story unlike any you've heard before. Subscribe now to hear episode 1 when it's released on February 3rd, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, here you go. Hopefully that was a little bit entertaining and a little bit gripping. And I really want to thank you all for supporting Profiling Evil. It was fun to spend some time with you tonight, and I'll look forward to reading your comments in the chats. And again, anytime you have a question, you can send it to profilingevil@gmail.com, and we'll include it in Feedback Friday, which is tomorrow morning. And I'll be answering a few questions that came in over the week and talking about a criminal case tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.